The video you're about to watch is part 2 of a 2-part video series. If you want to know how the K900 looks on the outside, on the inside, how comfortable the seats are, and how comfortable the trunk is, then go ahead and click that button right down there and you'll be taken on over to part 1 of this video. When you're out test driving the K900, especially if you're going to be test driving this against something along the lines of a BMW 5 Series or a Mercedes-Benz E-Class, it's important to keep in mind that the K900 is a decent amount larger. It's also heavier than a number of those options, and it's really obvious out on the road. As I said at the beginning of this video, especially in part 1, this is a competitor to the S-Class, the 7 Series, the Jaguar XJ, the Lexus LS, that kind of a vehicle, not necessarily the 5 Series or the E-Class. Now, the size and the weight difference is very obvious out on the road when we're talking about acceleration. I ran from 0 to 60 in 5.4 seconds in this K900, which is about 0.5 of a second slower than the Hyundai Genesis, even though the Genesis is very closely related and it had the exact same engine and transmission in it. That's because the Genesis is smaller than this. It is sort of a Lexus LS sized vehicle. It's bigger than a 5 Series or an E-Class, but it's not as big as a 7 Series or an S-Class. The size increase versus the Hyundai Genesis adds about 400 to 500 pounds to the K900 depending on who you ask. This is actually very similar in terms of dimensions to the Hyundai Equus, which is their larger full-size competitor. When comparing acceleration times, it's obvious this is going to be faster than the Lexus LS 460 or the 460L because it has a great deal more power under the hood. When comparing this to the Jaguar XJ, it's important to remember the XJ is considerably lighter than this because it is all aluminum. And that all aluminum construction really helps improve handling and acceleration in that Jaguar. Versus the other mainline luxury competitors like the Audi, the BMW, and the Mercedes, this is relatively similar in terms of curb weight, and so performance is going to be about the same horsepower for horsepower. That means that the higher horsepower turbocharged V8 options in the German competition will be faster than this because they're about the same weight, but they're more powerful. Now, very much like the Lexus LS 460, the V8 engine noise in this vehicle is a very classic V8 burble, and it's completely unfettered by turbochargers in the exhaust stream. If you take a look at the BMW and the Mercedes, the exhaust note is a little bit unimpressive, and that's because the turbochargers are in the way between the engine and your ears, basically. That's exactly why BMW pipes canned V8 engine noise into some of their M products. Now, overall acceleration came in at 7 out of 10 points, largely because all the way 5.4 second 0 to 60 time is quick in a relative sense if you take a look at all the cars available in the industry. In this luxury full-size segment, it's not terribly swift. Just about everybody else out there other than Lexus has a high horsepower version of their sedan, and they will accelerate significantly faster than this. When it comes to braking, I give this 8 out of 10 points. I ran from 60 to 0 in 126 feet. Fade resistance is very good. Pedal feel is about average for this segment. It feels a little bit soft, and the car doesn't overall feel like a sports car out on the road. Not that you'd expect a full-size luxury sedan too, of course. Now, the Jaguar XJ is by far the best braking feel in this segment. That's largely because it's considerably lighter than this. When it comes to the ride, I give this 10 out of 10 points. This has one of the best rides in this segment, and I would really compare the ride in the K900 to the Mercedes S550, which is about twice as expensive as this sedan. I would also say this is very similar to the Lexus LS 600 HL, which is also almost twice as expensive as this vehicle. It's very obvious that Kia was going for a very luxurious, very compliant ride for their luxury vehicle rather than a sporty ride like Jaguar was going for with the XJ. The XJ's ride comes in somewhere around 6 to 7 out of 10 points depending on the version that you get. It's a little bit stiffer sprung than any of the other entries in this segment because Jaguar is really focusing on handling. Kia's dedication to a very supple and luxurious ride is obvious when it comes to the handling section. I give this 6.5 points out of 10, and that's largely because of the softer springs on this vehicle. When you compare this to certain entries in this segment like the BMW 7 Series as well as the Jaguar XJ, those are definitely crisper handling vehicles out there. Audi's A8 definitely is more front heavy than the Mercedes, the Jaguar, or the BMW, and so I would give it around the same score as this Kia K900. By far the sharpest handling stand in this category is going to be the Jaguar XJ, and again, that is largely because of the very light curb weight. Now, in terms of the rest of the competition, I would give the BMW a 9 out of 10, and I would give the Mercedes-Benz S550 an 8 out of 10. So this is really very close to that S550 in terms of overall handling ability. Now, I'm talking about the S550 specifically because there are upper-level trims of the S-Class that do give you wider tires, stiffer springs, etc., and drastically improve the handling. However, they're significantly more expensive than this. The S550, comparably equipped to this K900, is already twice as expensive. And when you're looking at those higher performance versions of the S-Class, they're going to be 4 to 5 times more expensive than this car. Cabin noise comes in at 10 out of 10 points. We scored 67 decibels in this cabin, which actually makes this the quietest car I have tested so far. This is quieter on the inside than the Lexus LS 600 HL or the BMW 740. I can best describe the overall feel out on the road as big. The K900 is without a doubt a large and heavy luxury sedan. That's not a bad thing, however. Every luxury entry in this segment except for the XJ truly drives as big as they look. They're big sedans, they're heavy sedans, they're going to drive like a big luxury sedan out on the road. And that doesn't by any stretch of the imagination mean that the K900 isn't fun to drive out on my favorite winding mountain roads like this. This actually is a blast. It has a solid rear-wheel drive dynamic, and this is definitely more pleasing out on the road than the Lincoln, the Cadillac, or the Acura competition. The 8-speed automatic transmission that Kia uses is exactly the same transmission that you find in the Hyundai Genesis, and that's because it was co-designed by Kia and Hyundai. This is a very crisp feeling 8-speed automatic transmission. It's not quite as fast shifting or quite as intuitive as ZF's 8-speed automatic transmission that BMW, Mercedes, Jaguar, and just about everybody else in the luxury segment except for Mercedes uses. The only engine on offer in the K900 is this 5-liter naturally aspirated V8 engine, so it's also going to drive a little bit differently than all the other entries out there in the mainstream luxury group, because pretty much everybody else has gone to forced induction engines. Even Jaguar has moved out of their 5-liter naturally aspirated V8 engine for their base models into a 3-liter supercharged V6 engine. Now, there's definitely something to be said about a naturally aspirated engine like you'll find in the Infiniti as well as the Lexus competition. Power and torque build very gradually, very linearly as you accelerate and as you rev the engine up. That's very different than a turbocharged or a supercharged engine. Now, on the definite downside of the large naturally aspirated engine is fuel economy. I've been averaging 16.8 miles per gallon over a week of driving in this K900, and that's definitely not as good as you'll find in even the larger and the heavier German competition. Jaguar's 3-liter supercharged V6 by far gets some of the best fuel economy in this segment, yet again because of its light curb weight, but also because of that 6-cylinder engine. BMW's 7 Series also averaged about 21 miles per gallon during my week with that vehicle. It's not as fast as this, but it is definitely a little bit more efficient. As always, we must temper the way the vehicle drives with the way that it's priced before we can talk about value, so let's move right on over to pricing. Kia has made pricing incredibly simple for 2015. Things start out at $60,400. There's no additional upcharge for different paints or different interior combinations. There are relatively fewer paint combinations or interior combinations than you'll find in some of the luxury competition, however. Now, there's only one option package available on the K900. It is a $6,000 VIP package that gives you the surround camera, the adaptive cruise control, the 12.3-inch LCD instrument cluster, heads-up display. We also get the soft closed doors in the rear with cooled seats that also recline with 4-way adjustable lumbar support and a 16-way driver's seat. That means that you'll find an awful lot more standard features even on the base model than you'll find in a number of the luxury competition, such as standard navigation, standard stitched leather dashboard, standard fake suede headliner, etc. Now, with a price tag that starts that low and doesn't go too much higher, you may think that the K900 doesn't come as loaded as the competition. However, this is not only $12,650 less than a Lexus LS 460, but the base model also gives you about $6,000 more equipment. You get more power and more luxury features on the inside. Versus the BMW 740i, you'll pay $14,500 more for the 740i. It won't have nearly as much power in this, and it also doesn't have as much equipment. In fact, this has about $4,000 more standard equipment than that 740i. Versus the BMW 750i, which is the V8 version of the 7 Series, this is going to be $28,000 less expensive. Not only is it nearly 30 grand less, however, it also has about $1,000 more equipment than that BMW 7 Series. It's a similar story with the Audi A8, $15,595 less than the A8 3.0T. You get about $1,000 more equipment in this vehicle. However, we don't have all-wheel drive available or standard in the K900 at any price. Jaguar's XJ will also set you back approximately $15,000 more than the K900 in base form, but it will have about $3,000 less equipment on the inside, and you'll get more power in the K900 as well. The really big difference in this category, however, is the Mercedes-Benz S550. It is a whopping $34,000 more expensive than this in base form, and we get a little bit less power in this car and a tiny bit less room, but not a whole lot less. Now, in addition to that much larger price tag, that S550 is also lacking about $4,000 worth of equipment that you do get standard in the K900. Now, when you look at the K900 with the VIP package, soft closed rear doors, reclining rear seats, etc., that will set you back about $45,000 more than this if you do opt for the Mercedes. Now, obviously, the K900 is an incredible value when you compare it to the other full-size luxury competitors, but when you compare it to the mid-size luxury competitors like the Mercedes-Benz E-Class or the BMW 5 Series, the value proposition continues. This is about $4,500 less than a BMW 550i, even though it has about $5,000 more equipment on the inside. It's also larger with a larger trunk. It's not quite as powerful as the 550i, and it doesn't handle quite as well. This handles definitely like a larger sedan, but it's not that much worse. Versus Mercedes E550, this is about $1,400 less, doesn't have all-wheel drive. The E550 now does come standard with all-wheel drive, but we do have $7,000 more equipment going on the inside, as well as options that you just can't get in the E550. In addition to that, we also have considerably more space in the back and a much larger trunk. The same thing goes for Infiniti's Q70, which is $2,600 more expensive than this and comes with about $7,000 less equipment. So the true difference is almost $10,000. Infiniti has just announced their long wheelbase Q70L, and that's going to be about $4,600 more than this, but will still come with $7,000 less equipment. Thanks to the generously sized trunk and the incredibly large back seat, if you're a growing family and you do plan on putting child seats in your car, you should know it's much easier to put especially rearward-facing child seats in the Kia than any of these mid-size sedans. Now, things are still good for the K900 when you compare this with the other value luxury entries like the Cadillac XTS. That XTS is going to be $10,000 more expensive if you want to get the 420 horsepower version of that engine, and even the front-wheel drive 3.6-liter edition is still going to be $2,600 more than this. Now, the Cadillac and the K900 come out approximately the same when it comes to feature content. You do get a few features in this that you can't get in the XTS, and you get a few features in the XTS that you can't get in the K900. Now, the K900 does end up a little bit more expensive than a comparably equipped Acura RLX, but that's primarily because of the way the options are done on the RLX as well as on the K900. In order to get adaptive cruise control on this vehicle, you do have to add that $6,000 package. However, adding that $6,000 package makes this about $6,000 more expensive than a fully loaded RLX, but gives you approximately $7,000 worth of equipment over that RLX. So it is still a very good value compared to that Acura. This is going to be about $2,000 more than a fully loaded Volvo S80 T6 all-wheel drive, and the Volvo is decently smaller than this. It's also less powerful. It has a turbocharged 6-cylinder engine. It's a little over 300 horsepower. This has 420 horsepower under the hood. It's also a much bigger vehicle. The Lincoln MKS EcoBoost compares very well. It's about $6,000 less than this vehicle. It is probably the best value in this segment if you're not too worried about the badge that's on the hood. That MKS is about the same size on the inside. You don't get quite the same luxury features in that MKS as you can in this vehicle, but it is still a very good competitor. Now, the K900 is absolutely excellent value. This is thousands less than any of the direct full-size luxury car competition. It's also less expensive than most of those manufacturers' mid-size luxury competitors. Now, in many ways, that's what separates this from the Volkswagen Phaeton, which was Volkswagen's attempt at bringing a luxury vehicle branded as their mass market brand to America. That Volkswagen Phaeton was fairly expensive, and there wasn't that much of a discount between it and the mainline luxury players. With this vehicle, however, there is definitely a reason to buy this. This is less expensive even than a 5 Series or an E-Class. You get more room in the back, you get more accommodation and luxury features in the back of the vehicle, you get a bigger trunk, etc. as well. Now, the biggest deal with the K900 in my book, however, is that even though this is giving you 98% of the full-size luxury car experience for less than the mid-size luxury car price tag, you aren't lacking anything on the inside in reality. The Kia is very different than a Chrysler 300. The Chrysler 300 has a much more mass market feel to the cabin, and this K900 doesn't. Now, the 300 is less expensive, and so its value proposition is actually higher than the K900, but you do have that mass market interior to deal with, and you don't in the K900. This is a serious luxury sedan for people that can resist the fact that right down here on the wheels it says Kia. On the front bumper, on the rear bumper, it says Kia. Now, my question to you is, why are you buying a luxury car? Are you buying a luxury car because it says Lexus or BMW or Mercedes on the trunk and on the front of the car? Or are you buying the car because of the way it coddles you, coddles your passengers, the way that it handles, or the way that it accelerates? Because this vehicle truly handles and accelerates and performs and coddles you on the inside like a $90,000 luxury car. It's just that its price tag is $60,000 to $66,000, and it says Kia right here on the trunk lid. How much is that badge worth to you? If the answer isn't between $10,000 and $30,000, then you really ought to give the K900 a serious look. Now, all of that makes the K900 my absolute favorite car under $70,000. If you want to know more about my favorite cars, you can go find those over at alexonautos.com. There'll be a link there at the top of the page for best cars. This is my current best car under $70,000, and I think the Hyundai Genesis is my current favorite car under $60,000. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2015 Kia K900. Go ahead and click that subscribe banner at the bottom of your screen so you can be updated on all of my latest videos. You'll also find more information about how child seats work in this vehicle and a tech tidbits video. There'll be a link at the end of this video and right down there in the description section of this video. You can find me over at facebook.com/AlexNautos, over at Twitter as AlexNautos, and you can always email your questions to alex@alexnautos.com. I'll see you next week.